Welcome to this explainer. Let's jump right into the recent military actions in the Strait of Hormuz and the broader geopolitical strategy at play. Today, we're looking directly at the details provided in a recent high-level U.S. military press briefing. We really need to understand exactly what is happening in one of the world's absolutely most critical maritime choke points. Okay, let's kick this off with a pretty staggering number: 22,500. Right now, according to the briefing, that is the number of civilian mariners currently trapped on over 1,550 commercial vessels in the Arabian Gulf. They are caught in a very tense maritime standoff, completely unable to safely transit because of an effective blockade holding up their routes. And look, this blockade isn't just some isolated regional issue, right? It's a massive, immediate crisis for the global economy. The Strait of Hormuz facilitates roughly 1/5 of all global oil consumption. So for you and me, that means direct threats to gas prices, everyday supply chains, and, of course, rising inflation. Officials argue that by obstructing this transit route, the entire global supply chain is effectively being weaponized. To untangle all these complex events, we're going to follow a really clear roadmap. We'll cover the Strait of Hormuz crisis, introduce Project Freedom, look at U.S. forces on the ground, analyze the fragile ceasefire status, dive into epic fury and nuclear strategy, and finally, wrap up with the future global outlook. Starting right off with Section 1, the Strait of Hormuz crisis and the immediate threat we're facing. For the past 7 weeks, the administration asserts that Iranian forces have been indiscriminately harassing civilian vessels. The military characterizes this as a direct attempt to cut off traffic and impose an illegal tolling system on a recognized international waterway. Officials firmly state this is basically a form of international extortion. It fundamentally disregards established navigational rights and the broader law of the sea. Moving on to Section 2, introducing Project Freedom and the U.S. military response. So what exactly is Project Freedom? Well, military officials define it as a strictly defensive, highly focused, and temporary mission. The stated goal here isn't to start a war or to enter Iranian airspace. Instead, it's focused entirely on protecting commercial shipping routes and restoring the free flow of commerce for all nations navigating those waters. And to prove the waterway is actually clear, American ships literally led the way. By shouldering the initial risk, American destroyers and 2 U.S. commercial ships have already safely transited the strait. The U.S. military intends this maneuver to show the hundreds of waiting international ships that the blockade can be broken and that safe passage is indeed possible right now. Let's look at Section 3, U.S. forces on the ground and the mobilized defense assets. To enforce this safe passage, a massive defense network has been established. Officials refer to it as a red, white, and blue dome over the strait. This involves over 15,000 American service members, surface warships, and a fleet of over 100 aircraft. Crucially, all of this mobilization is being synchronized by the famous 82nd Airborne Division, who are reportedly utilizing next-generation AI-enabled tactical networks to coordinate land, air, sea, and cyber forces in real time. It's a massive undertaking. Now, while military leaders are hyper-focused on detecting fast boats, drones, and potential sea mines, they actually took a moment during the press briefing to firmly and honestly somewhat humorously debunk some of the more bizarre rumors circulating online. When asked by a reporter about the existence of Iranian kamikaze dolphins, leadership explicitly confirmed that no, they do not exist. On to Section 4, the fragile ceasefire status and why this is such a delicate situation. The data reveals a deeply fragile environment since the ceasefire was officially announced. Get this. Iranian forces have fired at commercial vessels 9 times, successfully seized 2 container ships, attacked regional neighbors like Oman and the UAE, and launched drones and missiles at U.S. forces over 10 times in recent weeks. Given all those attacks, you might be wondering, well, why hasn't the ceasefire completely collapsed? Military leaders describe these ongoing infractions as low-level kinetics. Essentially, they view this as purely harassing fire from a fractured Iranian command structure that, for now, remains just below the political threshold that would trigger a resumption of major full-scale combat operations. Which brings us to Section 5, Epic Fury and Nuclear Strategy. To really put this in perspective, the current operation, Project Freedom, is fundamentally different from the recent Operation Epic Fury. While Freedom is defensive, highly focused, and temporary, Epic Fury was a massive, offensive 12-day conventional war aimed directly at dismantling military capabilities across the board.
Chronologically, this whole escalation tracks back to late January, with the tragic loss of 3 U.S. service members at Tower 22. That prompted Operation Midnight Hammer, which targeted nuclear facilities. That was then immediately followed by the 12-day conventional war known as Operation Epic Fury, ultimately leading us to the current ceasefire and the initiation of Project Freedom we see today.
The crucial point behind those massive strikes hinges on a highly specific strategy. The administration believes Iran was trying to build a formidable conventional military umbrella, kind of similar to what North Korea has done to protect its ongoing pursuit of a nuclear weapon. Operations Midnight Hammer and Epic Fury were designed to aggressively strip away those conventional defenses, actively setting back their nuclear timeline and forcing leadership back to the negotiating table. Finally, Section 6, the future global outlook and what comes next. So the U.S. government is very clear that they do not intend to police the strait indefinitely. They view Project Freedom as a temporary gift to the world. Right now, they're explicitly calling on international partners, specifically mentioning countries like South Korea, Japan, and European allies, to eventually step up, take over the mission, and protect their own maritime commerce. Behind the scenes, the landscape is incredibly dynamic. Quiet negotiations for a lasting deal with Iran are actually ongoing, though Iranian diplomats face the internal challenge of reining in rogue actions by the IRGC, the Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. Meanwhile, the U.S. military remains in a locked and loaded three-point stance, completely prepared to resume combat if necessary, with operations being coordinated by the Commander-in-Chief, President Trump. Which leaves us with this final, pivotal question to consider. As the U.S. utilizes its military to stabilize the region and force diplomatic negotiations, will the rest of the global community actually step up to protect these vital international waterways? Or will the burden of global maritime security remain squarely on American forces? Thank you for joining me for this explainer. Keep asking questions, and I'll see you next time.